What's up, guys? It's Cameron Saunders here from GoFormat.com and FormatLibrary.com, and now coming at you from the MBT Yugioh Reaper Format Discord server, where I got top 4 in the June monthly with Bazoo Return. Bazoo Return today that focuses around abusing the effect of Bazoo the Soul Eater to banish monsters from a graveyard, combined with the trap card Return from a Different Dimension to seal and steal games. A lot of people question why I would play Bazoo Return because it's not a very well understood or very popular deck. And the reason I chose to play Bazoo Return was because Warriors won the last monthly, which was a huge upset because only one of them converted to the top 8. And so I knew that people were going to latch onto the deck. They were going to probably see that Warriors were a very consistent deck that were capable of winning tournaments. And I think that Bazoo has an incredible matchup versus Warrior. I would call it almost 100-0. I think that Bazoo is a stronger aggressive deck. I think that it has better follow-up plays. I think that it has a higher ceiling. And I think that all around, it's just a much stronger deck than Warrior can even hope to be. I also think that it has a pretty good matchup against Monarchs, especially Stein variants. Bazoo reaches 2500 attack, which beats all the Monarchs, including Hades, which people are playing a lot lately. And whenever they play Stein, if they have to win that turn. If they don't, then being on 3,000 or even lower life points means that they will absolutely lose. Every time I was Stein this tournament, I in fact did not lose the game. I won them the very next turn. So improper use of Stein is insanely punished by this deck, and all around it's capable of hitting Monarchs very hard because it can outdo a lot of what they want to do with ease and kill them when they least expect it. I'm also pretty comfortable with the deck. I've played the deck a lot, in GOAT format at least. I haven't really touched it in Reaper format, but I have played it in GOAT format. I know the deck pretty well. I've learned a lot of the deck's theory from World Gone Mad in his article, The Great Ape, where he talks about designing Bazoo Return as a better aggro deck than the Warrior decks that people were playing, which I completely and totally agree with. As I stated before, this deck just outdoes Warriors. And there's nothing worse that you can do to shoot yourself in the foot when playing a tournament than to play a deck you're unfamiliar with. I could have played Monarchs. I know that deck fairly well, but I'm just not as familiar with Monarch, and I don't have as good of a build for it. So I knew that I wouldn't do as well, if I were to bring it, regardless of whether or not it's a better deck. So I thought that my comfort level with Bazoo was good enough, and I thought the deck was good enough that I could take it to the top. It also exemplifies and embodies all the theory that I proclaim about this game. While most people would consider theory to have separate pillars where they talk about card advantage, and they talk about life points, and they talk about position, and the fourth one that doesn't get talked about as much but is very important, the ability to play the game, I consider all of these for the exact same thing that you analyze with different degrees of critique at stages of the game. The different inflection points will tell you when life points are more important than cards, or when cards are more important than life points, when position is more important than either, and when the ability to play the game is running low and you need to start playing differently. I think Bazoo is being such an aggressive and such a very good aggressive deck is capable of trading its cards for life points with ease. You can summon a monster, like Berserk Gorilla even. Let's say I summon Berserk Gorilla and I attack for 2,000. If they Cyber Dragon and run over it, I got 2,000 damage in, and I'm capable of using that life point differential to my advantage later on in the game, as long as I play properly, of course. Not to mention, because Return pays half your life points instead of a set amount like Dimension Fusion, I'm able to get myself really low, and leverage my life points in order to get access to more cards and secure a game shot with greater potential. I'm also able to use my monster's size to set up boards that are difficult to break, and it's very possible that a 2500 Bazoo not only is a powerful attacker on your turn, but an oppressive floodgate of the opponent's turn that stops them from entering their own battle phase. So, and with all that being said, the ability to play the game is off the charts. You have a deck capable of loading the grave with monsters nonstop to fuel Bazoo, which means top decking a Bazoo is the same as top decking a Summon Skull, but you can normal summon it. Top decking Return means that you can steal games you shouldn't. And all around, the deck is just capable of drawing incredibly well. Almost every hand is completely and totally playable, and those that aren't can be fixed by waiting it out. So I think that the deck is just highly capable, and it exemplifies every aspect of theory combined into one, exactly as you should look at it. So with all that being said, it's time to get into the deck, and I just want to give out a disclaimer, not to brag, but just as an actual disclaimer, I did not test this deck in a single game, let alone match, before entering into the event. It's built purely based on theory. The theory did me well, and I just want you guys to understand that the card choices come solely from my thoughts about the game and about the deck. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first card of the deck is, of course, 3 copies of Bazoo the Soul Eater. He is the button that sets the deck off. He is your win condition. Accessing Bazoo is critical, and losing Bazoo is hurtful. Bazoo has pretty much perfect stats. If he banishes 1 monster, he reaches 1900, which beats all the 1800 beaters of the format. If he banishes 2, then he hits 2200, which beats Cyber Dragon. And if he banishes 3, then he hits 2500, which beats Ryukaki, Monarchs, and Dark Ruler Hades, which is, again, growing in popularity. And what's important about that is that Bazoo is just not always 2500 attack. You have to weigh, how many options you have in your graveyard, how many of them you might need later, and consider how many cards to banish. So I think Bazoo is not only a high ceiling card, it's a high skill card. You absolutely have to take into account your future turns, and I'm talking as many as 5 turns in advance, if not more, setting up your graveyard and considering the impact of every single monster that you banish later on. There are some monsters you need to leave in your grave because they're useful in your grave to banish later. There are some monsters you need to banish now because you need them banished and you want them to not be touched. There are some monsters that you want to leave in the grave simply because Bazoo doesn't need to use them right now and you want to use them later. And deciding which monsters to banish, in most situations, is usually pretty easy. You'll banish your Cyber Dragons and your Berserk Gorillas first because they're your biggest beaters. So, your return plays are bigger and you can feign cards like that. But it's not always that easy. You definitely do have to come to a lot of decision trees with Bazoo. It's really not about how much you banish or what you banish. It's about both combined and like the impacts they have on the game. And I definitely think people use Bazoo incorrectly when they summon him. They almost always pump him up to 2500 and just call it a day. They attack over something, and then next turn when he's 1600 and they need to get over another monster, they can't do it. So it's definitely pretty crucial that you learn to use Bazoo in the most optimal way in order to use the deck in the most optimal way. The next monster I play is 3 Thunder Dragons. Thunder Dragon is a really high ceiling card for the deck. It's kind of a brick, but Thunder Dragon has the quality that it is a spell card in the hand and a monster card in the graveyard. When in the hand, it duplicates itself into 2 more Thunder Dragons, and then because of the rules of the format, you can actually fail to find Thunder Dragons in your deck. So you can discard 1 to search 2, and then discard the other 2 for nothing. And what this does is not only loads the grave for Bazoo, it also puts lights in the grave for Chaos Sorcerer, and loads the grave for another card we'll talk about later, which is very crucial in some matchups. And even on its own, Bazoo plus 3 Thunder Dragons is 7,300 damage off of return, which means that if you get a really strong start and you can get some open shots in like that, you can put your opponent down very, very quickly, and it will be very hard for them to come back from, or it will outright kill them if they use a card like Confiscation. So it's very crucial to the way I play the deck in this particular build. I do think that it may not be optimal in this format because Graceful Charity is not legal, which means that it's a bit more difficult to convert into real advantage. And all things considered, I would not be against the idea of someone playing a deck without the Thunder Dragons. But we'll talk about that later as well. My next monster is 3 Dekuchi the Battle Chanted Locomotive. I have so many things to say about Dekoichi. I've talked about him before in articles I've written, like my Philosophy of Greed article, where I talk about how Dekoichi being 1400 attack means that he has to be dealt with. Dekoichi alone on direct attacks is a 6-turn clock. The opponent absolutely has to deal with him after he's drawn a card, which means he's already replaced himself, and the opponent using any card like Sakuretsu on him, basically anything that's not battle removal is going to be a neg for them, and it's going to be very good for you when they start removing the Koichis with Sakus and Dark Holes, because they just can't have him beat face anymore. And so once he's being removed by real cards, loading a grave for Bazoo, positionally you're just about won completely. Dekoichi forces so many things because of his size, and he's just capable of so much of a deck. If he gets knocked, that's an extra 4,200 damage off of return. Some builds might play limiter removal, which would instantly be game, which is a hilarious play. I don't play limiter removal. I think it's a little bricky, but it is at least funny when that happens. And regardless, anytime Dekoichi gets knocked, you're pretty much happy about it, because you know that once return is online, that you have a lot of things you can start doing. And when your opponent puts return online for you, well, yeah, you can punish them for it. Dekoichi all around is an incredible card. It's the most aggressive flip monster. When you talk about aggro decks, people don't really play flip monsters. They want things like DD Assailant, and they want Blade Knight, or even Spear Reaper because of its hand rip effect. And Dekoichi is capable of doing so much. It does die to recruiters, which is annoying. It does get plussed on by recruiters because of its 1400 attack. That is a huge downside. But I don't think recruiters are exceptionally common in the meta right now. And I'm definitely aware that even when that happens, you're pretty much fine. If they get Songen, then you don't really have to worry about too much. If they get Spear Reaper, then a Spear Reaper in attack position is it's perfectly fine for you. They can rip all the cards they want if they leave it in attack position, because you can punish that super hard. And all around, Dekoichi is without fail a card I love seeing in my hand. So I definitely play 3. I think that he is insane. 100% the best inclusion in the deck other than Bazoo himself, and there's no way I'm leaving home without him. Next up, I play 2 Cyber Dragon. So Cyber Dragon is a really cool, not because he's Cyber Dragon, and not just because of his light attribute or anything. He actually, what he does is he breaks your normal summon rule for you, which is important. That's obviously what Cyber Dragon does for most people, but for me, Cyber Dragon crashes with itself. So if my opponent has Cyber Dragon up, which can be very hard to deal with without a Bazoo online, Cyber Dragon is capable of crashing with it, setting up the grave for Bazoo later, and opening up my other attackers. And because of its ability to special summon itself from the hand, it can do this without using a normal summon. So I can use that on, I can set Dekoichi afterwards. I can do a lot of plays because of Cyber Dragon that I couldn't normally do, especially if I couldn't answer him. So Cyber Dragon's pretty crucial to playing this particular deck, simply because of his ability to break your normal summon and crash with himself. So definitely suggest playing 2. I do not suggest playing 3. You don't want it going first. You don't want it in every game state. You don't want to top deck it. It's worth playing 2, but not 3. So take that as you may. I do think that Cyber Dragon is necessary, though. Then I play 2 Berserk Gorilla. Now, a lot of people hate on Berserk Gorilla because he's just a big vanilla. And I think that that's all he needs to be. Berserk Gorilla hits a pretty important number, actually. 2,000 attack means that if your opponent confiscations you, which is pretty common, a 2,000 direct puts them on 5,000, so they can't Stein. And no other normal summon except Bazoo himself is capable of putting them on that. He also beats other 1,800 and 1,900 attackers in battle, like Kaiku, which turns off the entire deck. So he's pretty good there. And the biggest critique I see of Berserk Gorilla is that he dies to Cyber Dragon, which, like I mentioned earlier, I don't care. If Berserk Gorilla dies to Cyber Dragon, then that means they were in a position to summon Cyber Dragon, and that means Berserk Gorilla did his job. Either he battle plussed on something, and then the Cyber Dragon is just canceling it out, or he hit for 2,000, and even though I'm taking a -1 from being attacked by the Cyber Dragon, I've taken 2,000 life points from my opponent, which is really big in this deck, and it's a very good life point differential for the aggressive deck. Berserk Gorilla always performed. He was exceptionally good. The only time he was not very good was when level limit area B was on the field. Other than that, he was never, ever a bad card to have. I definitely enjoyed it, and I would recommend that you play him or another beater of his kind, and we may discuss more of those later. So, moving on, I've got 2 Kaiku, the Ghost Destroyer. So Kaiku, it's really good in a meta with a lot of Frog Monarchs. It banishes Treeborn Frog from a graveyard. It's good against Chaos decks and fellow Bazoo decks, like I said. And it's just a pretty good beat stick. 1,800 attacks, nothing to scoff at. At the bare minimum, just like Cyber Dragon crashes with itself, Kaiku will crash with himself as well. So Kaiku was just all around a strong pick for the meta, and definitely a card that I would suggest people at least side. You probably don't need to main Kaiku moving forward in this deck, but I just figured it was good against Monarch, and that was something that I wanted to be able to be covered. Next up is 2 Magical Merchant. Now, Magical Merchant is the other aggressive flip of the deck, and people don't really seem to get that Magical Merchant is the insane card that it is, and it's because they use it wrong. Magical Merchant can't really be used to like set turn 1. It's just not very good. It's not an impactful play. You will mill cards you don't want to mill into spells and traps you don't need yet. It's very difficult to use right, I think, but it's very impactful when you do use it right. But it's very punishing to use wrong, and I think that's why a lot of people steer away from this type of build of Bazoo. Even though it has such a high ceiling, it's very difficult to actually use right. And Magical Merchant is, the height of a skill-based card in this deck. Even though, it seems like, oh, it's all luck. You mill 5 monsters and get return. Wow, like very lucky plays. But if you set up the way you've been playing the game correctly, then Magical Merchant will benefit you in more ways than you can imagine. And I think that he raises the deck ceiling by so much just from being present. But you play 2 copies because you don't want to open him. Like I said, setting him going first, turn 1 is just not very good. And but resolving him multiple times is excellent. So I definitely suggest in this build of Bazoo, you play Magical Merchant. And a lot of people don't like it with Thunder Dragon, because milling Thunder Dragons means that the ones in your deck are dead, but if all goes right with Magical Merchant, I won't see those, and I don't really care if I mill a dead Thunder Dragon, because the graveyard is where cards go to be dead anyway. And that's and that's just, a way you have to look at it. Like, you can't fuss over milling a Thunder Dragon or a Dekoichi. Just because you want those cards in your hand doesn't mean they're not useful in the grave. So Magical Merchant is definitely a must for this type of build. Moving into the one-offs, I play 1 Chaos Sorcerer. A lot of people are playing 2, even 3 Chaos Sorcerer in this build they call Chaos Bazoo, but this is not Chaos Bazoo. I don't like that name. I don't think that it's accurate. Chaos Sorcerer is a replacement for BLS. That's all it is. It's not an aggressive card. It's very reactive. In fact, you summon it to answer threats rather than being the threat. Summoning Chaos Sorcerer in attack position, as Wargo Mad puts it, is summoning Gaia the Fierce Knight in attack position. It's not exactly the best thing to be doing, and it wastes a resource, but you can use it aggressively in that way. It's definitely got aggressive applications, and I think that even though it can't double attack like BLS, which is what makes BLS such an aggressive threat, the popularity of Spirit Reaper does mean that you want at least the 1 copy. I wouldn't play 2, so I definitely do say I want exactly the 1 copy. Because outing Spirit Reaper is a pretty good thing to be able to do, and especially when you can avoid playing additional outs and you can just play in-engine outs. So I don't want 2 Chaos Sorcerer in my hand. I don't care if I mill it. I don't care if I see it. It's an additional bomb that's capable of removing a threat that I can remove in other ways. Chaos Sorcerer is definitely not that great, and I don't think it's really worth playing 2 or 3 of. So I do just play the 1 Chaos Sorcerer. The other monsters I play are Breaker, DD Warrior Lady, and Songan. Those are all pretty easy. to fathom why. Songen gets the DD Warrior Lady, gets the Merchant, gets the Dekoichi. It's an aggressive threat under level limit, which is funny. We call it the Songen Clock. He's a walking wave motion cannon, if you will. And he's just capable of getting a lot of the important cards of the deck. He's not mandatory, though, and I definitely wouldn't be against cutting him if you were to put more aggressive cards in his place. That's really up to like future me to decide if I still want to play him. So the last monster of the deck is Cyberjar. Cyberjar is really volatile, and that's what makes it so good here, actually. It's yet another aggressive flip monster, and because we have 22 total monsters, we get more out of it than our opponent ever does. Except for one time in the tournament, I flipped it and got 0 monsters, and my opponent got 4 and left me on 3,200 life points. And also got Solemn Judgment for the Dark Hole I had in my hand, so I couldn't actually out all of them. And it was very difficult to come back from that, but I did manage it. I summoned Berserk Gorilla, hit over a Kaiku. Then in main phase 2, I had to snatch steal a monster, and it was a very odd line. And you normally don't want to snatch steal in main phase 2, but I ran the calculations, if you will, and it was pretty optimal to snatch in main phase 2, I thought. So I maneuvered the game state pretty well through that point, and I got a win out of that, even though I whiffed on Cyberjar. But normally on Cyberjar, you're going to be getting the better end of it. So I definitely think that it's worth playing here. For the spells, my spell lineup is simple but effective. I play a full lineup of the limited spells. I play Book of Moon, Card Destruction, Confiscation, Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, MST, Nobleman, Snatch Steal. There's not a lot to say about these cards except that they're limited for a reason. Card Destruction is good with Thunder Dragon, and it's also just, I don't care at any point in time, like what's in my hand, I will Card Destruction it away if I need to. I have no attachment to any of these cards. They can all be replaced with other cards. Bazoo, I can draw into more Bazoos, even if I have them in my hand. I can draw into more Beat Sticks, or I can draw into Heavy Storm and then get a return play off. And Book of Moon turns off Kaiku, and it turns off Brain Control. So those are both very crucial interactions for Book of Moon to carry. I normally wouldn't play it in an aggressive deck like this, because I don't think it's like actually exceptionally useful in aggro builds, but Book of Moon is definitely very good here, so I do support playing that. Next up is 3, Return from a Different Dimension. I see a lot of people playing 2 copies of this. I see a lot of people playing the wrong number. Return is pretty much always live. It's very rarely not. There will be times where it's not live, but it doesn't matter if you open it dead and something happens to it. If a Heavy Storm, you're dead, return away, you're fine. You don't need return. You have more copies to draw later. You can Card Destruction away without worrying about it. You can lose every single copy of Return from Different Dimension and still have a perfectly fine working deck. So it's not really a problem that Return's ever dead. It can be used in a variety of ways as well. It can be used on any life point counter like Dimension Fusion. It doesn't give your opponent cards, so it doesn't make you not able to play Nobleman. It can be used as a very expensive Waboku if you absolutely have to. And plays like that are capable of getting you back in the game when you otherwise shouldn't be. So Return is just definitely a must-have at 3, especially in this type of build that's capable of banishing a lot of cards pretty quickly. So next up, I play 3 Saku. Saku is my only really defensive spot removal option for the deck, because I knew that the Warrior matchup was pretty easy, but Saku is still very useful there. It's useful against Monarchs because people are on more Hades and less Mobius, because they are hedging for the Monarch matchup for the mirror, and Mobius is just not very good there. Hades doesn't gain advantage of being tribute summoned like Zaborg does, which means if you Saku it, unless they tributed Frog, it means that they're -1. Even if they did tribute Frog, then you just 1-for-1 to Sakuretsu, and it's perfectly fine. And Zaborg, you also don't really care if you have to Saku as a Zaborg, because you want your monsters in the grave anyway. Saving the 2400 damage is a bit more important than really caring. And if they tribute anything other than Frog, you again went 1-for-1 with it. So it's absolutely fine to have to Saku as a Zaborg. I never worried about that. The only Monarch it's really bad against is Mobius. And so I never complained about having Saku. I never thought it was very bad. Game 2, it comes out against a fair amount of things. But game one, Sakuretsu is quite good. It's very good against the Dead Rat deck with Pyramid Turtle and Giant Rat and Ryukaki. It can, when Pyramid Turtle attacks you, Sakuretsu becomes practically the best card in your deck because it's just this huge swing where they can't actually do anything for the rest of their turn. So they have to play it safe, and if they don't play it safe, you Saku them. If they do play it safe, you get through them and you make a breakthrough, and that's also a game. So I think that matchup is very good as well. It's like an improved warrior matchup. Even I didn't lose to any Dead Rats in this tournament. I didn't lose any warriors in this tournament. I thought that those matchups were just absolutely unfair and lopsided in my favor. Monarch was the only matchup that I thought was anything less than even. Really anything less than 60-40. So, yeah, I think this deck is just capable, and even against Monarch, you can main cards like Sakuretsu Armor, and you're still more than capable of winning game ones, and then moving on into game two, you have an advantage from a side deck. So, the next up, I played 2 Phoenix Wing. Phoenix Wing was pretty consistently good, even when I didn't have Thunder Dragon. Being that it's an aggro deck, it's capable of securing a win position. Because if you Phoenix Wing a back row and then set up a board and they top deck it and say that back row is torrential and now you don't have to summon ever again, or even if they top deck like Saku or something, now instead of having one normal summon that they can Saku and trade, even with they only have the answer to one of your attackers, and you can normal summon another next turn and get through, and you can push for damage that way. So it effectively gives it gives your opponent a -1 positionally for the turn. They have to draw a card that's no longer relevant. Even if you have to Phoenix Wing a Spirit Reaper, it can be really, really terrible for them to have to draw that back and reset it, especially when you're capable of drawing the answer to it. So, Phoenix Wing, if I were not to play Thunder Dragon, I probably wouldn't play it. I might also consider Raigeki Break because of Spirit Reaper, because Raigeki Breaking Spirit Reaper is much better than Phoenix Wing when blasting it. But in the Monarch matchup, Phoenix Wing spinning Treeborn Frog just almost wins the game on the spot. It's such a strong tempo play in that matchup, and you really can't ask for better against him. It's chainable to Mobius even. So Phoenix Wing was definitely a card that put in a lot of work in that matchup and in others throughout the whole event. Phoenix Wing over Ryukaki, and what are they going to do? They're going to draw the worst card in their deck to draw for turn. So definitely think Phoenix Wing was a good call, but Raigeki Break's an option. Then I played Torrential. Torrential is just a good card. There's no Mirror Force in the format, so you do need some way to actually deal with fields like that. And finally, the last card in my deck, the one I mentioned earlier, was Skull Air. Skull Air is really extra copies of Bazoo. If you come across an opponent maybe still playing Scapegoat, obviously you banish 4 monsters and you kill all 4 tokens, but that's not the best application. You can banish 3 to kill Spirit Reaper. Even if they MST it, Spirit Reaper will die. But the most important thing he did for me in this tournament was in the Stall Burn matchup in my first top 16 round against a Duck. He had a Kaiser Ojama Trio lock on me, but both in game 2 and 3, I managed to turbo draw with card destruction into my Skull Air, and I managed 6 monsters, took a bit of burn damage to pop all of them, and unlocking myself from Kaiser and Ojama Trio, I was able to summon Mystic Swordsman level 2, kill his set, fully unlock from Kaiser, and kill him with return. And that's entirely thanks to Skull Air. I was completely and totally locked down from playing the game without Skull Air, and this card is just crucial for a lot of matchups. You can actually even use it to neg kill a Treeborn Frog if you have to, just to set up return plays. It's one banish. You don't have to worry about it too much, and it's just a really good card. I absolutely loved it. It did underperform in Swiss, I will say. I didn't love it every time I had it in Swiss. I didn't see it very often, and when I did see it, I was like, well, this could be any other card. But it did save me in Top Cut, and I think that in those matchups, you have to at least side Skull Air for the burn matchup, just because of its ability to get you out of that lock, which is really common. So I'll go back through it one more time so you can see it. All right. Now let's talk about the side deck. So, for the side deck, first I thought about all the matchups I could face, and when I say all the matchups, I mean not all of them. There were a few that I completely missed, and I kind of felt it, and a few cards I forgot to side, because I built the side deck pretty hastily before the event. But it did work pretty well most of the time, so I do side the 2 Spirit Reaper. I side this for like Rescue Cat or something, even though they play Yugioh or Panda. If they don't see Spirit Reaper game 1, they might not go that route. It was good against any aggressive deck like Warrior, which is a deck I normally don't see myself needing a side for. But I mean, it's better than having flip monsters when they play Mystic Swordsmen and Blade Knights and stuff. So Spirit Reaper was all around pretty good in the side. I would not main it. I don't think it's an aggressive enough monster. I don't think it does enough damage. I just don't think it does enough in the main deck. But in the side, it's definitely very good. And I think you absolutely have to be siding at least 1 copy of this card. And that depends on if you play like a build like with Tomatoes and Recruiters. If you play Tomatoes, maybe only side 1 because you can get to it whenever you want. But Spirit Reaper was definitely a good side the whole event, so I don't regret that. Mystic Swordsman level 2 was probably the best side deck card. A lot of people play Drillroid, but they ignore the fact that Drillroid is level 4, which is a problem, and also 1600 attack, which is a problem. In the matchups where you want the effect of Mystic Swordsman level 2, Drillroid doesn't cut it. He doesn't get under Gravity Bind, he doesn't get under Level Limit, he doesn't get under Messenger of Peace. Whereas Mystic Swordsman level 2 gets under all of them, is capable of dealing with the set cards. It can't deal with a face-up Reaper, but a face-up Reaper dies to a Light Breeze, honestly. Like, you can deal with that with so many other cards. It just doesn't matter. And being able to out the set monsters that give you trouble is far more crucial than being able to out a face-up Reaper with Drillroid. So this card is so far and above Drillroid in terms of usefulness in the side deck. I can't imagine playing Drillroid over it. Then I played 2 Mind Control, and this is not a very common side in this format. I expected a bit of Flip Chaos, like the deck that I play, to come through the event. I didn't see any of that. So Mind Control was kind of a wasted side slot. I did side it in versus Burn to out the Kaiser lock, because Kaiser prevents you from putting cards on the field, it doesn't prevent from changing control, so you can use Mind Control to take their monster, turn off Kaiser, flip them Burn with Deskoala or Stealth Bird, give it back to them flipped, and they can't use the effect the next turn. So that's definitely an application for it. But all around, it was not an exceptionally great side deck card. I don't think I sided in any other matchup. Probably just don't side this card. I thought it would be pretty cool, but it was not. My mistake, but yeah, Mind Control just not great. Then I played 2 Smashing Ground, which is great. So Smashing Ground comes in versus Monarchs, and the reason why is because Monarchs can establish themselves pretty easily. You need to be able to top deck outs to them. You know, you can't play Bottomless. If they've already summoned a Monarch, what does Bottomless do? You need to play cards like Smashing Ground to get out of cards like Hades, any Monarch card, Spirit Reaper even dies to Smashing Ground in most game states against Monarch. And it's also good against Warriors. It's good against other Bazoo decks. Anything that fields kind of like 1 monster at a time and just wants to pressure you with it. Smashing Ground's very good against. It lets you get through, lets you push damage, and there's nothing really to say about it. It's just a solid spot removal card. The next that I sided was 2 copies of Threatening Roar. This is, for Stein Monarch. This is for any kind of really fast OTK strategy that plays True Nades or any kind of alt win like that. So I sided in versus Rescue Cat. Obviously, I think it's just a staple side deck card at this point. You can't get away without paying the tax for those decks in your side deck. So no complaints. Obviously, you absolutely have to side it. Then I played 2 Trap Dust Shoot and 3 Dust Tornado. So The reason I'm putting these together is because they kind of go hand in hand in why they're in the side deck and not the main. Dust Tornado obviously has this really good combo with Return, where you can in phase Dust Tornado their card, then you set Return, next turn you kill them. That's great. You don't need that. Trap Dust Shoot is really good versus the Alt Win and is good versus Monarchs. But the reason I sided them is because while Trap Dust Shoot's good against Monarchs and Dust Tornado is good against Warriors, Dust Tornado is really, really bad against Monarchs, and Trap Dust Shoot's really, really bad against Warriors. So while this card improves my Warrior matchup and this card improves my Monarch matchup, they don't improve those respective matchups as bad as they harm the other matchup. So, Dust Tornado hurts my Monarch matchup so much more than it improves my Warrior matchup, and vice versa for Trap Dust Shoot. So you definitely have to side those cards because it doesn't make a lot of sense to main them when you're giving yourself a disadvantage by doing so. And when it comes to Dust Tornado and the return play, Return is a pretty skillful card to use in that you don't need that play. And the reason why is because you can actually play Return by making reads on your opponent. So you can know by how they play and how they get rid of cards, whether they have heavy in hand, whether they have like Dust Tornado set or something, Mobius in hand. Throughout 8 rounds of Swiss and 3 rounds of Top Cut, I had my Return from Different Dimension popped while face down once. It was because I wasn't thinking about Mobius and they had it, and yeah, you win some, you lose some. But throughout the entirety of Swiss, like I said, I didn't lose my Return from Different Dimension to Heavy Storm or Dust Tornado or MST. You just have to you have to know the right time to set it. It's when you know that even if they answer it, then you're going to be able to secure a game shot is probably the best time to set Return, because you definitely want them to be scared of it. And you want to play in such a way that the opponent is going to waste their removal on things that are not returned because they could be. And against certain opponents, that just goes a long way. They'll set Dust Tornado and you'll set anything. It doesn't matter what you can set, a dead card destruction or dead snatch steal, and they'll Dust Tornado in phase because they don't want to die to return. And then next turn they'll set MST and you'll set something else and they'll MST that. They don't want to die to return. And then eventually by the time you have set return, they have nothing left to answer it. And so making those kind of reads on who your opponent is and how they're playing and the cards that they play that are in their deck, you can get away with never having to do the Dust Tornado play, and it's really helpful. It's helpful for sure, but especially in the Warrior matchup where they play tons of back row and they play their own Dust Tornadoes and triplicates sometimes, and they can just snipe it with Breaker, or they can rip it out of your hand with Don Zalug, and you would rather them not do that. But on the whole, I think that play is a crutch, and it's not a pro play. It's a pretty crutch play, and that's all that. That's the kind of stuff that you need to get out of your mindset when you're playing the deck. You need to play in a way that forces your opponent to play weird. You don't need to be playing weird. You don't need to be doing tricks like that. You're playing an aggro deck. You're playing a deck that puts out the threats, and your opponent is the one that has to respond to them. And a set return, whether it's return or not, is a threat they have to answer and see if they can deal with. The next thing to talk about, I would say, is the deck building itself. I don't main Smashing Ground. A lot of people main Smashing Ground because it's a way to out monsters that their opponent control, like Spirit Reaper. And it's just not very useful. You got to consider what are you looking at here? You're looking at 3 Bazoo, you're looking at 2 Cyber Dragon, you're looking at 2 Berserk Gorilla. These are core removal. These are removal cards. You don't want to build your deck with tons of spot removal. I put Saku in because it's really good against the meta right now. But it's the only spot removal card that I think is worth playing in the main deck for this particular meta. And Smashing Ground just doesn't cut it. It's spot removal. It's not core removal. It doesn't do anywhere close to what the other cards in your deck are capable of doing. It's an answer, and you're not playing a deck that answers. You're playing a deck that puts out the threats, that forces the answers. So Smashing Ground just turns off cards like Haiku and gets through Monarchs. it doesn't really benefit you in the main deck. You don't ever need it in the main. It's not worth playing in the main. It just comes down to this core principle where battle is one of the most efficient means of removal, and your deck is operating on that. Like it's when I wrote about it in the philosophy of greed, I put that battle, other than attach removal like Blackluster Soldier, Chaos Sorcerer, battle is the most efficient means of getting rid of your opponent's cards, because every time a monster kills something, it lives to do it again. It just keeps going. Your opponent has to answer it. Now they're at a disadvantage because they lost a card to it, and they're going to lose another card to it when they try to answer it the next time. So that's one of the things that really guides the deck building principles of aggro, is to just play threats and not answers. So you don't play cards like Dust Tornado and Smashing Ground that are nothing more than spot removal. You don't play those in the main deck. You're playing the deck where every card that you play is Dust Tornado. Takoichi is basically walking Sakuretsu. They eventually have to deal with it. Berserk Gorilla, same story. And then Cyber Dragon is a walking Smashing Ground. Your deck is just completely and fully equipped for that. And then you have cards like Magical Merchant, where you absolutely just pretty much can't set them until you've got to Bazoo. If you set Magical Merchant and then you mill Bazoo before you have access to it, not only did you get rid of a Bazoo in your deck, but you can draw it and make your engine live. You put yourself even farther away from another copy of it. So you harmed yourself twofold. You got rid of one of your key engine pieces, and you put yourself farther away from getting to another of them. And that's why I think that people stray away from Magical Merchant. It's just too difficult. It comes back to a philosophy of fire and resources you can't get back, and the ability to play the game and make good draws, good top decks, and good mills. And when you play Magical Merchant in a carefree way, that it harms you in the long run, because you run risks that you shouldn't run. Magical Merchant may kind of be based on luck because of how many monsters you mill or what spell you mill into, but you can make that type of luck work in your favor. So if I have all my Bazoos out of the deck, I know I'm only milling good monsters, and I can banish for Bazoo into cards like Return or Card Destruction to draw into Return. So, and obviously every spell and trap that I play in the deck, except for I guess maybe Saku and Book, are insane things to get off of Magical Merchant. You're never really upset with the spell or trap that Magical Merchant hits, but you can be upset with the monster that it mills. But you can really you can cut back on the times that bite you by playing Merchant right, by understanding how to read the game state and knowing when you need to set it, when you need to what beaters you need to set it next to, how your opponent can answer any type of card you've got, because Magical Merchant resolving at the wrong time is devastating, or can be, I guess. Sometimes it can get you really lucky as well, but you want to play towards your worst case scenario, not your best case one, and try and fix your gameplay style to reflect that you want your deck to perform properly, and that you don't want to mill all your Bazoos before you get access to a way to banish. So all that being said, there are a few cards that I think I could have played and probably should have. World Gone Mad always tells me that 22-9-9 is the optimal ratio for all Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Not all of them, but for Bazoo, he says 22-9-9 is the ratio, and one such card that can get me there is by cutting a Phoenix Wing for Lightning Vortex. Lightning Vortex, it's just the same as Phoenix Wing when it comes to the discard. You get rid of an extra Thunder Dragon or any monster you don't need that can set up your graveyard and out Spirit Reaper or any big field of guys. Lightning Vortex is definitely a card worth playing. I do think that I probably should have played it at some point in the main or side, probably again over the second Phoenix Wing. So, this is just a great card to have in Bazoo. Any kind of aggro deck that can expend the discard is going to benefit from being able to use it. And I honestly wish I'd played it. There are a lot of situations where I thought that Lightning Vortex would have been good to have, and by replacing Phoenix Wing for it, or maybe Saku, but I'll probably say Phoenix Wing right now, you can hit that optimal 22-9-9 ratio and play like me and World Gone Mad. So the next card will be Giant Trunade. Trunade is really good for the side deck against burn and back row heavy decks. It'll force Solemns, which is what you want, because you win on a life point differential the vast majority of the time. And obviously against removing the attack floodgates in the burn matchup will help you out far more than it'll ever harm you. So Definitely a card worth playing. And then the card I forgot to side the whole time was King Tiger Wanku. I was beating myself up the whole tournament because I realized like round one, like, oh man, I could play Wanku right now, and Monarch players would just crumble. I mean, they can still revive Treeborn, and then when Wanku triggers, tribute it for enemy controller and take it. They can still brain control it, but it's obviously very, very good against them. And when you banish it with Bazoo, you have it on demand at that point from there. Like Wanku turns return for different dimension to a floodgate. You banish it for Bazoo. It's just kind of like Haiku, and then you return it, and your opponent can't do whatever they wanted to do, even though you lost half your life points, and those cards get taken away at the end phase. You don't really care. I mean, like I said before, you're an aggro deck. You don't have to resolve return to win. At least not like to win the game right then. You can resolve return at any other time and gain advantage off it in weird ways. You can go for game with return if they maybe fair playing Scapegoat in 2006, maybe limited to one copy and they drew it, but you have Wanku, you can return and get that back. And Scapegoat shut off, and they don't have Mirror Force available. And another thing about return is that if you chain it to something, they can't torrential you. So with no Mirror Force in the format, and with torrential not being able to activate when you resolve return at Chain Link 2, it's really crazy. Next up, Regeki Break. Like I said before, I think Phoenix Wing's probably better this format from a Monarch matchup, but Regeki Break is still really useful for Spear Reaper. I definitely think that it is worth considering if you were going to play it. Any discard trap. Next up, DD Assailant. I don't have Rhodas in this list. Maybe you could play Rhodas. The thing about DD Assailant is that it banishes itself, which kind of counteracts with Bazoo, but it does make return live quicker. I don't really like DD Assailant that much, though, because I do think, like I said before, it's an aggro deck, not a return deck. You don't care about return being live that much. You can fully win without resolving it, and DD Assailant is just kind of subpar compared to other options. So next up is Skill Dark Magician. Now this one is absolutely one of my favorites. Skill Dark Magician is like Berserk Gorilla with 100 less attack, which is never relevant when battling other things. But being that he has 1700 defense, you play Skill Dark Magician, set him to the field, oh, they're DD Assailant attacks, and now it walls them. If your opponent's playing Monarchs and you attack them and they enemy controller, but I mean that's Sakuretsu against Berserk Gorilla, but against Skill Dark it's nothing. I played against a Hydrogeddon beatdown deck after the tournament. It was Pandas, and he played 3 enemy controller and 3 Hydrogeddon, and that's obviously really good against Berserk Gorilla. Even if you book Berserk Gorilla, it has 1000 defense, so Hydrogeddon runs over it. You book or enemy controller Skill Dark Magician, it still walls Hydrogeddon. Really good in that matchup, so I definitely think that if that gets more popular, Skill Dark Magician is just way better than Bazoo. It just has to be. And moving forward, I definitely wouldn't be upset to see people play this. It's one of my favorite cards. I've been playing it in GOAT format since 2016. I was one of the first people to be on it, and it was it was really impactful to the meta when I brought it up and when other people started playing it. So great card there. Then 3 Mystic Tomato, 1 to 3, I just put all 3 in the pile because I felt like it. This card, like I said earlier, maybe not a terrible option. It's good against Warriors, which are already good against. You don't really need to be improving that matchup, but it does help whenever you can improve one matchup alongside improving others. I wouldn't really be too upset if someone thought that Mystic Tomato was a good option for the day. It's 1400 attack, just like the Koichi. It forces the same things. It gets you to Sangen faster, which gets you to Cyber Jar, which gets you to Bazoo faster. It gets you to DD Warrior Lady faster, and DD Warrior Lady alone is capable of turning and return from different dimensions. So, not the worst option. I would not be too terribly against it. But finally, Royal Decree. Royal Decree obviously is a card you're going to be looking at what? This is a return deck, right? You play 10 traps in the main. Well, the thing about Royal Decree is that in the matchups where it's good, first off, that's worth it. You don't really need to care too much. If you combine Royal Decree and True Nade or Heavy, the burn player can't stop anything you're doing, and you are just going to win at that point because they can't. And if you I mean, you side out returns in that matchup anyway. You side out down to 1 or 2 returns, 2 if you can't find anything else to side out, but 1 return will probably be optimal in the burn matchup. But what it really comes down to is the fact that Royal Decree shutting off traps means that you're kind of free with how you play the deck, because this is not a return deck. This is an aggro deck that uses return, that supports return. But it's not a deck whose sole win condition is return, and I think that's what steers a lot of people in the wrong direction. So you see a lot of people playing a deck that has 3 Bazoo, 2 Chaos Sorcerer, and then they're playing 2 returns and 3 Solemns, because return becomes their win condition. So they don't want to draw it too early because it bricks. They don't want to use it in weird ways, like with the Wango example, or just to bring back a DD Warrior Lady, things you can do when you play 3 copies. They don't want to use it like that. They use Solemn Judgment as an insurance policy for return, when in reality, return is the insurance policy for aggression. So that's why I don't play Solemn. I don't like Solemn in this deck. I don't think Solemn is good in this deck. It's not about versatility. Solemn is a versatile card, but it's not about versatility. It's about impact. Royal Decree is not versatile. Royal Decree does one thing and one thing only. But obviously, every time this card flips, it's impactful. It's not the same for Solemn. Solemn's a terrible defensive card. Costs half your life points. From 8,000, that's 4,000 life points. It's not a good defensive card. It can secure 1 positions, but it's not good when you're losing. It's not a good top deck. Return is an incredible top deck. Solemn will never attack for game when you top deck it on 0 cards. Return gives you a chance. Return steals games you shouldn't win just because you drew it. It's an all-around better insurance policy for aggression alongside Bazoo than Solemn Judgment can ever be. And I think that's why I think that this is a better aggro deck than Warriors. You can play cards like Decree and not care because your monsters are all bigger than theirs, and your insurance policy is better. Your insurance policy wins the game, theirs prolongs it. And there's a huge difference there. So all around, some tips and tricks, of course. You can pretty much always dodge all the removal in the format and win the game by, chain link 1 MST on your own, or I guess on their back row it makes more sense if they have it. And then you chain return, and they can't torrential you, and you can just go from there. So you're never getting torrentialed. It's never a worry. So you don't need Dust Storm of the main for that. What you can do is you can summon Bazoo and not call priority. They have to torrential you then, because if you call priority and chain return, then they'll still be able to torrential because your chain link 1 is Bazoo in response to the summon. If you don't call priority, they have to torrential right then, and then of course your field is free to return for game. If they don't torrential, then you banish 3 for return, and then you chain return. You banish 3 for Bazoo as a cost, and then you chain return, and they can't torrential you then either, and you go for game. There's no Mirror Force to worry about. Not a problem. And so plays like that are really unique and cool to Bazoo. It makes it a huge ceiling aggressive deck that is more than most decks in the format can ever hope to be. Do I think that Bazoo is the best deck in the format? I'm pretty sure it's still Stein Monarch. I think they have a huge ceiling. I think they're capable of doing tons of stuff, but they do brick. This deck does not brick very much. It's a very consistent deck. It's a very powerful deck. Obviously Stein Monarch is good because it wins on the spot sometimes and is capable of doing tons of stupid plays, but Bazoo is capable of doing tons of stupid plays as well. I do think it was the best deck in the tournament. I think that it was the best deck for this tournament. If I had not got as unlucky I did in the top cut, which I can't blame it all on luck. I do think that there are things I could have done differently in the burn matchup. I could have been summoning my Decoichis so that they couldn't rivalry Ojama me, which was a killer. So maybe I really did just punt that matchup, but I don't think I played terribly there. I think that I played as good as I could given the circumstances, and just and maybe just refine it a little more, and I can beat the matchup without the side cards next time. But with the battle floodgates like level limit and gravity bind, it's still very difficult going from there. But yeah, I think that this deck was the best in the tournament for sure. I think that this deck was insane, and some shout out cards, Pot of Greed, Graceful, Duo, and Mirror Force Ring, tribe, and of course the biggest baddest boy himself, BLS. These are cards that I would love to play, but I'm not allowed to. But it would be nice. Those cards would take this deck far over the top, and it may be better off for everyone else, but I'm not allowed to use them. So, I want to give some credit, obviously, to World Gone Mad for his original article on Bazoo Return. It's great. I'm going to link in the description. It's very brash, very direct, and to the point. It takes you really into his mind on how he built the original Bazoo deck and how the theory was adapted to this format, and how I managed to build this deck and do so well with it just on the theory alone. I want to give a shout out, obviously, to my team Damage Step. That's my GOAT format team, and to my team Season 0, which is me, Kesha, the famous singer, Mr. Bowie, and Gamer Tabby. Me, Mr. Bowie, and Gamer Tabby we all got top 16 of this event, and Kesha got top 16 of the last one. We all have done quite well for ourselves going in this format right now, and so between Season 0 and Damage Step, a lot of testing, a lot of good games are going on, and we're making a lot of really incredible leaps in both GOAT and Reaper format. And of course, I want to thank MBT for hosting a format, and I want to thank everyone in the server that was behind me for it, because a lot of people wanted me to win. A lot of people really were rallying behind me to beat Care into the top 4, which, like I said, I was really unlucky I couldn't do it and pull it to finals, but that happens. That's Yugioh, and I'm not. Like I said, I could play better. So, that's it. That's it, really. And just want to thank you guys for watching the video if you did, and I'm going to link all the related material in the description so that you can go read it. And see you next time, guys.